Look at this empty Django project. A Django project always contains at least some configuration and then one or more applications. An application example would be a shop or a newsletter service. The idea here is to split functionality into different apps. In this course, there will be only one application, the shop. But we will start with an empty project that just has some configuration. Start by creating a project folder called Gennaro on your computer. Just find a place on your computer where you can easily find it back. Then start your favorite code editor. In this course, I use Visual Studio Code, but you are free to use any code editor you are comfortable with. Visual Studio Code has an integrated terminal window, which I will use to execute terminal commands. Open the project folder in Visual Studio Code. The project folder name is shown in the title bar. Open a new terminal in Visual Studio Code. And this is what it should look like. Depending on theme settings, your editor might look a bit different. If you have opened the project and are ready to type in terminal commands, it's time to create a Django project. I start by creating a virtual environment. When the virtual environment is created, I activate it. If you are on Windows, the activate command looks differently. I assume that Windows users know the command to activate a virtual environment. The env in parentheses indicate that the virtual environment is activated. I pip install Django. When Django is installed, a Django project can be created. I use the Django admin command to start a project called config. Config might sound like a strange name for the project. Just ignore it for now. We will restructure things in a moment anyway. I expand the project folders. Look at the folder structure that was created by Django. Django created two nested folders, both called config. We need to remove the outer config folder. First, I'll move manage.py to the project root folder. Then I move the contents of the inner config folder to the outer config folder. And finally, I remove the inner config folder. Now there is a project root folder and it contains the configuration folder, the virtual environment and manage.py. Before you move on with this video, make sure you have the exact same project structure. If you do have the same structure, we can start the Django server. Go back to the terminal and list the directory. All administration in Django will be done with manage.py. So every time you execute Django commands, make sure you are in the root folder that contains manage.py. Let's run the web server. The terminal shows that a web server was started at localhost port 8000. Let's open that address in a browser. There we go. Django was installed successfully and serves a test page. If you go back to the terminal, the Django web server shows the requests it received from your browser. But of course, this test page is not what we want. So in the next part, you will learn how to add your first page to the project.